Forget everything you think you know about gladiators. The movies lie. The video games mislead. We picture them sweat-slicked and muscle-bound, locked in a dance of death, a roaring crowd baying for blood, thumbs down sealing fates. It's a powerful image, seared into our collective consciousness, an icon of ancient Rome's brutal spectacle. But what if that icon, that primal scream of the arena, is built on a foundation of sand? What if the men who fought beneath the colossal shadow of the Colosseum were far more complex, far more human than the myth allows? What if their existence was less about a guaranteed, gory end and more about calculated risk, strategic survival, and a surprising degree of value? Picture a young man, let's call him Severus. He wasn't born into this life. Few were. He might have been a prisoner of war, a condemned criminal, or a desperate volunteer selling his freedom for a chance at fame or a debt erased. His childhood, if you could call it that, ended the moment he entered the ludus the gladiator school. It was a world within a world, a brutal monastery of muscle and steel. Here, under the watchful, often cruel, eye of the Lanista Severus was stripped of his past, his name, his identity, and forged anew. This was his sheltered upbringing, a relentless regimen of physical conditioning, weapon training, and a diet carefully calibrated for strength and healing. The world outside the high walls of the ludus was a distant hum. Inside, every breath, every drop of sweat, every bruise was about one thing: survival in the arena. They were drilled not just to fight, but to perform, to become a spectacle. Yet within this Spartan existence there was a strange paradox. They were condemned, yes, but they were also meticulously cared for. Their bodies, sculpted by endless training, were not merely meat for the grinder. They were highly valuable assets, investments. Every swing of a sword, every parry, every calculated move represented weeks, months, sometimes years of costly training. Replacing a skilled gladiator wasn't like replacing a broken tool. It was like losing a racehorse, a prize fighter, a substantial sum of money. The myth tells us they were utterly disposable. The reality of the Lannista's ledger tells a different story. Then came the day, not his first fight, not yet, but the spectacle he was forced to witness. A seasoned Threeks, a warrior he'd seen train with terrifying precision, faced a Retiarius agile and elusive. The crowd roared, a primal wave of sound Severus had only imagined. The Threeks fought bravely, skillfully, but in a desperate flurry he was disarmed, tripped. His shield clattered, his sword skittered away. He lay prone, defenseless, but not broken. With a gesture that sent a ripple of surprise through Severus, the Threeks extended an index finger, a simple, almost elegant signal. Ad digitatum *. He was surrendering. Severus, conditioned to believe the fight always ended in blood, watched, breath held tight in his chest. The crowd, a fickle beast, paused. Their roar softened, transforming into a murmur. The editor *, the game's sponsor, stood poised. This was the moment. The myth dictated a swift, brutal end. But then a flash of white, a collective gasp, and the editor's thumb turned. Up missio mercy, the Threeks lived. He was helped up, wounds tended, led away. Severus, hidden in the shadows beneath the stands, felt a tremor run through him. This wasn't the narrative he'd been sold. This wasn't the inevitable, glorious death. This was something else entirely. The Roman imagination, steeped in epic poetry and tales of gods and monsters, had already cast the gladiator in a mythic role. They were the children of Mars, the embodiment of raw, untamed power, or perhaps the doomed heroes descending into a ritualistic underworld. They were seen as separate, almost inhuman, their lives a fleeting blaze of glory before the inevitable darkness. This was the myth perpetuated by poets and politicians, amplified by the very spectacle itself, that these men were destined by fate and by custom to die for the entertainment of the masses. They were the sacrifice, the offering to the gods of the arena. But the cold, hard logic of Roman economics told a very different tale. These weren't disposable items. They were investments, often considerable ones. Think of a champion athlete today, a prized racehorse, or a top-tier performer. Their training is rigorous, their care meticulous, their value immense. A gladiator, especially a skilled one, was no different. Their Lannisti poured vast sums into their acquisition, their specialized diets, their custom armor, and crucially, their medical care. The myth whispers of a swift, uncaring end for the defeated. The reality, meticulously documented by figures like Galen, the renowned physician, reveals a sophisticated, specialized medical fraternity dedicated to keeping gladiators alive. They treated grotesque wounds, lacerations, broken bones, concussions with a level of expertise astonishing for the ancient world. Why? Because a living, healing gladiator could fight again. A dead gladiator was a financial loss, a capital investment gone. This wasn't about sentimentality, it was about the ledger, the return on investment. The symbolism here is profound. The myth cloaked them in a shroud of inevitable death, but beneath that shroud, the practical hand of commerce was stitching them back together, literally and figuratively, for another performance. They were not merely sacrifices, they were assets to be preserved. The myth of the arena dictates that every clash was a death sentence, a grim ballet culminating in a crimson finale. Every movie, every dramatic retelling reinforces this visceral image. Two warriors, one left standing, the other a bloodied corpse. The crowd, insatiable, demanding nothing less than absolute finality. This relentless pursuit of death, this bloodlust, is often presented as the very heart of the gladiator games. It's the story of inevitable doom, etched into the stone of the Colosseum itself. Yet archaeological evidence and rigorous historical analysis paint a far less absolute picture. Studies of wall paintings in Pompeii, vivid snapshots from the 1st century AD depicting actual gladiator bouts, suggest a striking statistic. Only about 1 out of every 5 fights ended with the death of the loser. Some estimates even push this survival rate higher, indicating that a remarkable 80 to 90% of defeated gladiators walked out of the arena alive. This wasn't a slaughterhouse, it was a theater of controlled violence, a high-stakes drama where the ultimate outcome was far from predetermined. The symbolism here is potent. The myth presents a one-way door to oblivion, a fatalistic plunge into the abyss, but the reality reveals a hidden corridor, a path back to life, a chance to fight another day. The arena in this light transforms from a grave into a crucible of endurance, skill, and desperate hope. For Severus, watching that Threaks rise, seeing the crowd's approval for mercy, the rigid framework of his understanding began to crack. He had been trained to fight to win, yes, but also to fight with a certain valor, a defiance that might sway the *editor*. He began to understand that his performance, his courage even in the face of defeat, held a power beyond mere aggression. It wasn't just about killing, it was about fighting well, about displaying a kind of defiant artistry. It was about earning the crowd's respect, and through that earning a chance at *missio*. The myth of the gladiator was a powerful narrative of unyielding brutality, a simple, blood-soaked equation, but the truth was a far more nuanced dance between violence and value, between spectacle and survival. The arena was not always a place of death, but often a stage for a desperate, thrilling, and sometimes merciful performance. The revelation wasn't that death was impossible, but that it wasn't the only outcome. It wasn't even the most common outcome. This understanding began to reshape Severus's perception of his own fate, shifting from grim acceptance to a strategic calculation. He was not merely a pawn marching towards an inescapable end. He was an actor, a performer, a valuable commodity whose very survival was, to a surprising degree, within his grasp, influenced by his skill, his courage, and the complex, often contradictory whims of the crowd and the sponsor. The choice between life and death, he realized, wasn't always a foregone conclusion dictated by some ancient, bloodthirsty decree. It was a negotiation, a moment of profound agency in a world designed to strip men of all freedom. This was his awakening. This was the moment the myth began to crumble, replaced by a stark, yet strangely empowering reality. The arena, once a symbol of absolute finality, now shimmered with the possibility of another dawn, another fight, another chance at life itself. The illusion had shattered, and in its place, a complex, almost hopeful truth emerged, forever altering his path forward. The shattered illusion left not a void, but a profound shift in perspective. The arena, once a crucible of absolute finality, now revealed itself as a stage of nuanced negotiation. For the man who stood in its dust, newly aware of the system's hidden levers, the very air seemed to thicken with possibility. He had walked to the precipice of death, felt its cold breath, and discovered not a chasm, but a hidden path. This was his underworld journey, not one of spectral shades and mythical rivers, but of very real steel and the roar of 1,000 voices, yet just as profound. Think of Orpheus descending into the sunless realm of Hades, not to conquer with might, but to charm with melody, to sway the unyielding rulers of the dead with the sheer force of his art. Orpheus sought to reclaim a life that had been snatched away, to defy the natural order of mortality through an act of profound, almost impossible persuasion. He played his lyre and the Furies wept, Cerberus lay down his guard, and even Hades and Persephone were moved, granting him a chance, a conditional return from the ultimate end. For the gladiator, this was his Orphic song. Not a tune plucked on strings, but the intricate dance of his blade, the calculated thrust, the theatrical parry, the desperate plea for mercy that spoke not just to the emperor, but to the collective heart of the Roman masses. His performance, his resilience, his charisma, these were the notes of his lyre, capable of softening the harshest judgments, of eliciting the thumbs up that meant life. It wasn't magic, but the calculated artistry of survival within a brutal spectacle. The rational explanation lay in the economic reality and the psychology of entertainment. A dead gladiator, especially a popular one, was a loss. He represented an investment in training, equipment, and crowd appeal. To kill a skilled fighter was to destroy a valuable asset, a draw for future games. The Romans loved spectacle, but they also loved a good story, a hero who defied the odds. The mercy offered was often less about compassion and more about pragmatism, about sustaining the show, about recognizing the narrative value of a warrior who fought valiantly, perhaps lost, but lived to fight another day, creating anticipation for his next appearance. This wasn't a divine intervention, but a deeply human and deeply Roman calculus. This new understanding didn't diminish the danger, it merely redefined it. The fear of death remained a constant companion, but it was now overlaid with a new kind of pressure. The pressure to be worthy asterisk of survival, to turn every bout into a compelling drama, to ensure the crowd's investment in his fate. He was no longer just a pawn to be sacrificed, but a protagonist whose narrative arc could be influenced. The very notion of fate, once an iron cage, now revealed hairline cracks, offering glimpses of agency. Consider Prometheus, defying the gods, stealing fire from Olympus to gift to humanity. His act was one of audacious rebellion against a predetermined order, a profound belief in the potential for human self-determination, even against divine will. He brought light and warmth and the means of creation to a world plunged in ignorance, suffering eternal punishment for his transgression, yet forever celebrated as the bringer of enlightenment. The gladiator's revelation was his Promethean fire. It wasn't a physical flame, but the spark of knowledge, the illumination that the absolute power of the arena was not, in fact, absolute. This knowledge, once gleaned, was a dangerous gift. It offered hope, but also a heavier burden of responsibility. He had seen behind the curtain, understood the levers of power, and now carried the silent obligation to share the subversive truth, not through words, but through his very existence. He became a living testament to the possibility of choice, even in chains. This fire was the understanding that the spectacle was a two-way street. The crowd demanded blood, yes, but they also demanded entertainment, heroism, and sometimes a reprieve. The editor of the game sought glory, but also sought to fill his coffers. The gladiator, by mastering the art of the fight and the art of the appeal, could manipulate these desires. He wasn't stealing fire from the gods, but recognizing the very human, very flawed nature of the gods who orchestrated these games, the politicians, the wealthy patrons, the fickle masses. It was a rational insight into power dynamics, not a mystical theft. This transformation was not merely about survival, it was about the reclamation of self. Before he was a body, a weapon, an instrument of another's will. Now he was a mind, a strategist, an actor in his own life's grim play. His senses sharpened. He began to read the crowd not just for their bloodlust, but for their shifting sympathies. He observed the emperor's moods, the subtle cues of the editor, the whispers and murmurs that could turn a death sentence into a reprieve. Every gesture, every blow, every feigned weakness or sudden surge of strength became part of a larger, more intricate performance aimed at securing not just victory, but life. The arena floor, once a stage for his inevitable demise, became a canvas for his calculated defiance. Each fight was a negotiation, a thesis presented to the masses. I am worthy, I am valuable, I deserve to live. And the roaring crowd, the ultimate arbiter, often agreed. They loved the drama, the near-death experiences, the improbable triumphs. They understood the narrative of the underdog, the hero who earned his life through sheer will and skill. The myth of the always fatal fight began to recede, replaced by a more complex, more human understanding of the gladiator's precarious dance with destiny. He realized that the true power of the gladiator lay not in his ability to kill, but in his capacity to asterisk live amidst death, to embody resilience, to inspire awe and pity in equal measure. He became a symbol not just of Roman might, but of the tenacious human spirit that clung to existence against all odds. His breakthrough was the understanding that he was not merely a combatant, but a storyteller, his body the narrative, his survival the plot twist. He was no longer a slave to fate, but a master of opportunity, navigating the treacherous currents of the arena with newfound purpose. This was his true freedom, born not from liberation from his chains, but from liberation from the idea of his own inevitable end. It was the birth of a new kind of gladiator, one who fought not just to win, but to live asterisk, to strategize, to perform, to charm, to manipulate the very forces that sought to consume him. This was his personal breakthrough, the moment he stepped beyond the myth and into the stark, demanding, yet empowering reality of his own agency. He had found his voice not in words, but in the eloquent language of survival, forever altering his path and the very definition of his existence. He was transformed.